You say you're going to see him later today? Are you going down?
We'll
are you going down the pub there, Ollie?
I'm just a little north. Not too far.
So it's funny when I was working there in the noughties. I guess he called me Ollie. So and that's the start. That's what. So a lot of people do call me Ollie. Like my wife calls me Ollie. But I don't feel it's very professional these days. As I've got old and boring, I've decided that Oliver is more fitting, and it's a more mature name.
Has more gravitas.
Yeah.
But you didn't add your middle name in there. Where's your middle name? Shouldn't it be like Oliver Tecumseh Cronk?
Yeah. Well, the whole thing about names, actually, the reason I say it is because I got so teased by about my middle name and my surname at school. When I first went to uni, I just told everyone I was Ollie for like 6 months. I didn't tell anyone any other name because I got sick of just being ribbed for my names because I stupidly told my school friends what they were. And I may have told you this before, but like one of them is Paul, so fairly normal. But then the other one is Camille, Kamiel, which is the name of my Belgian great-grandfather. But of course, school kids being school kids decided to call me Camel.
Sorry.
I got it is funny. Looking back, it is funny. But like I had 6 years of Camel. I'm like, right, I'm not going to uni and I'm not being called Camel for 3 years at university. So.
Well, I think we just have the cold open right there. Excellent.
It's all set. So you have two middle names? Is that what you just told us?
Yeah. Paul, sadly, is the uncle that I never got to know because he died of leukemia when he was 10, so in the 60s. And Camille is, my Belgian great-grandfather. Yeah.
Oh. Well, sorry to hear, but can't hide money, really. Congratulations. 2 middle names. I was so poor that we couldn't actually. I don't even have one, so that's the.
I mean, there are 2 Oliver Cronks in the UK. I think maybe even in the world, but there's only one Oliver Paul Camille Cronk.
Of course,
naturally.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm not going to go into my middle names.
No, you're going to have to now.
He made it up.
You think you were humiliated?
Come on, tell us.
So the Lockharts, one branch of the family. You're married with the McDonalds, right? So for a long time, they were known as the McDonald Lockharts, hyphenated. I had a grandfather. My grandfather was Ronald Lockhart. Ronald Gardner Lockhart. And so Christopher Ronald MacDonald, McDonald. Not the Irish, the Scottish.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Sorry.
You're welcome.
You're telling people your kids clowned around with you about that. That's what you're telling us, right?
Chris, you win. You win. And by the way, that's the cold open right there.
Yeah, the thing is, he couldn't even bring himself to say it all together, right? He's like, oh, you have to figure this out on your own.
Oh God, that was good. Yeah.
Wendy's reaction is amazing.
Yeah, I agree.
Poor Wendy, she's gonna have
I gotta stop thinking about it. It's the way you say it, and my middle name is Ronald. Oh gosh.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Consultants Saying Things. I am Chris Lockhart. Very special episode. This is number 50. 50 episodes of this podcast. 4 years ago, we started out talking about design thinking, and we've gone through a whole bunch of different topics since then. What I wanted to do for this is basically go back and take a look at the top 5 episodes by viewership over the past 4 years and pull out some clips from those 5 episodes to be able to show to everybody some of the journey that we've been on over this time. What's really interesting about this is I've pulled out stuff that I don't think made the final cut. There's some stuff never before seen footage, that sort of thing, which I kind of find interesting. And it was really eye-opening to see what were the top 5 episodes out of 50 over the past 4 years. So, we're going to start with the most watched episode ever, and most listened to ever, which is episode 14. It was the one about agile being BS. Very popular episode, still being watched by you guys today. So that's up first. It's followed by, believe it or not, one that we just recorded just late last year, the one about business architecture. Really popular, really great conversation around business architecture. The third is actually an episode that, I'll be honest, I had forgotten about. This is an episode about Consulting 4.0, which, as you'll see in the conversation, we had a lot to say about what we thought that meant. Following that, the number 4 episode is actually the one about the PMO. So this is a very interesting conversation that we had about PMO with an old colleague of mine and an expert in the PMO. And it's a very, very interesting conversation to bring from a couple years back into today. And the 5th most watch is also another one that we just recently recorded. And this has really got to do with ethics in consulting, which was really fascinating late last year when we were talking about ethics in our panel. So I hope you enjoy these 5 episodes. Again, thank you all for watching all this time. Please go check out the YouTube channel and subscribe and like, as we say on the podcast. So I hope you enjoy this. This is the 50th episode of Consultants Saying Things. First up, the most watched episode ever, episode 14, the one about agile being bullshit.
I love by the way, Phil is strangely silent right now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was trying to figure out where you were getting to with this bit, right? I mean, to me, and I don't know, I'm not one who sat around and thought about where agile came from. But if I were thinking about what it looks like from my point of view, right? It was like, is this not a response to waterfall? It was a response to these big overblown systems where everything got defined and we didn't get to the end because we got caught up in some process. And I get it as a response to that. But I mean, I get that what I think is your real complaint about this is not that things can't be fast, loose, and out of control, but that some people are using it as a cover for just bad practices or lack of discipline.
Yes, and if make money by promoting bad discipline and lack of practice.
Yeah. So if you step back, right? You said it started off in 2001, but this thing has caught up extremely fast in last few years, and especially when the new native digital companies like Google's and Facebook's of the world started becoming most active. So here is my experience when I work with large enterprises. Traditionally, you have legacy systems. They need business needs some features to be developed. If it goes through the regular process, it takes like numerous months for them to build something, and time to market is very high, right? They take numerous months and years to build something. They needed something faster because in today's world, if you think of something, if you can't deploy in a matter of probably few weeks or months, then that idea becomes obsolete. So they needed a faster way to do that. When they looked around what's available, probably agile has caught fire at that time and said, you know what, let's do agile business, agile product development, agile software development. But what they forgot was agile was not in the DNA of the company. It's a way people think. People needs to be smart enough to adopt that. You can't train legacy mindset people to become agile overnight.
And that's where I get around. That's my thing around agile is bullshit, is because you got a top 4 selling something that your top technical companies, that the ones they're selling the service to, want to model themselves after, but yet those top companies don't do safe. They don't do Scrum. And I'm gonna be loose with that because they do representative types of management practices, but they're not doing what your top 4 sells specifically.
So where they start from is, I agree with you. They don't do pure agile or pure scrum. What they start off with is they try to understand what their company culture is. Then they take something which is closest available, but they customize it to their need, their culture, their people, and to their own demand. And they call it probably something else. And all of a sudden, if that company becomes successful, everybody starts following, saying that this is the next big thing. And rest of the corporate world, starts running towards that. And then consulting firms will start building practices around that. And people who have read those books would say that, we will help you build this particular agile practice. And they have never done this in their life.
What is agile? What does people talk about at the end of the day in agile? Like anybody go to the agilemanifesto.org, you'll see have their 4 pillars, right? Individuals of interactions, working software, customer collaboration, responding to change. Chris, as you talked about lean, once you get back into, and it's funny, there's a good argument that even the 12 things they have in there are comparable to Deming's 14 points, which is in lean, where this came from. I'm getting back to a point where it's like you get the scrum and like these agile frameworks. This is why I call bullshit on most agile. People want to go back to a project management thing and do something new, yet disregard the fundamental aspects. And you go back to the culture of how this operates. Is like how the human business process operates.
So look, my discipline is mostly enterprise architecture, right? It has been for most of my career. And this is a discipline that has innumerable, many, a plethora of
infinitesimal
amount of frameworks, right? Frameworks frameworks out the wazoo for how you do it, right? How you're supposed to do it. And picking up on something Shashi said, right? There is no one way to do many of these things, right? There are many different ways, and they have to be fit for purpose, right? They have to be customized to fit your particular enterprise.
This comes out because someone says, hey, this isn't going fast enough, or we're not delivering, or, kind of where Bill was in the beginning of this thing, which is we started down this path, but the environment changed, or we missed a requirement, or something comes along the path, and we just feel like the process we're using doesn't respond quickly enough.
Yeah.
I think this is how things go from one spot to another. But the thing is, I can sense in you guys in particular, there's a real passion for something being wrong here, right? There is something that doesn't smell right about what's happening here. And it feels like it's all slick. It feels like it's all form and no substance. And so then the question becomes, can we suss that out? Can we figure out what the core is that we do need to have? And how do we go in and detect this BS and cure it when we need to?
I think that's the best way for agile itself to come to fruition, is the people who are the closest to the customer, or people who are closest to the work, to make decisions on how the work itself should progress to the endpoint.
I want to say I have never heard the passion for agile in any other context that I have in this room here right now, right? Nobody is like this about it. I mean, that's not a thing that I come across, right? I mean, I come across a bunch of passionate developers, but, the guys that I spend the most time with, they're interested in the same way that you are in getting the work done, right? Being useful. And if this is part of the system, they're all for it. But if it gets in the way, they go do something else.
In summary, for me, A, it is not bullshit. B, it's not the solution to all the problem. You have to take the fundamental good practices, what it has to offer, and customize it to your context. Context is extremely important.
For my part, I think it comes down to delivering value, which we talked about. I think it can be done in many different ways, right? You think you could do it waterfall or not. And I think it has to be fit for purpose. And, I am with you that there tends to be an overemphasis on slick marketing and sales by consulting firms. So I'm somewhere in the middle that, maybe the way it's sold and marketed is bullshit. But, if you are getting results from it, it's hard to argue with the scoreboard. So the second most watched episode 46, the one about business architecture.
But I mean, I don't know. Is there a problem in this space that needs to be addressed? Does business architecture suffer from a crisis of identity like enterprise architecture often has?
Well, it does, but actually, I will say we've been breaking through for a while now, and this actually gets to the strategic positioning. So it does suffer from the Swiss Army knife, but it's gained real traction upstream as a translator of strategy execution, right? Translator of strategy. So that's really the problem it's solving. And it's like once if because that pain is usually so bad in organizations, if you can get them to acknowledge it, then you can open up the Swiss Army knife and use it for other things. But it's been good brilliant question. Brilliant question.
All right.
Brilliant.
So, and maybe that you answer this during the opening monologue or whatever, but the difference between BA and EA, right? Business is how the business communicates. Enterprise is how we structure the software. Or am I thinking about something?
I think we should hold that until we're in.
Let's do it.
Because that was going to be a point I was going to kind of talk about as well. Yeah.
Love it. Which is not as interesting as the why it is. So, but what it is business architecture is a set of views for an organization. So let's break that down a little bit. If we were to think about a set of blueprints for a home, which might be easier, there's different layers, right? There might be a facade, there might be electrical, there might be plumbing. Organizations have blueprints as well, but they're different layers. They're things like the capabilities, the reusable building blocks that describe what we do, their value streams, their information, products we sell, and a bunch of other things. So if we think about business architecture as sort of this cohesive blueprint, again, set of views for an organization, that's what it is. So to unpack a tiny bit more, there's an organization called the Business Architecture Guild, which has formalized those views. And basically there's 10 different views. Don't need to go into detail, but it's important to say that we're no longer out there making up what it is and what it isn't. It's 10 specific things. And what makes the business architecture unique is that it's a view of an entire organization. So we have lots and lots of fragmented views of what we do. This is the one place where we see the forest for the trees, entirely what we do as an organization from end to end at a very high level. And that allows us to do some pretty cool things.
Well, but wait a second. Isn't that enterprise architecture? Oliver, what's the difference?
Yeah, so I think business architecture, so this is my slightly controversial view. We're interested in what Wendy thinks, but I think business architecture exists because enterprise architecture failed. And by that, I mean enterprise architecture became too IT dominated, right? I think.
Wait. Can we quote you? We're going to flash that quote up and on LinkedIn, and we're going to say Oliver said EA failed.
You cut me mid-flow. In most organizations,
okay, gotcha.
Right? I think there are some organizations that because a true enterprise architect, someone who can look at the broad aspects of the business, the different layers, as well as the technology, I think is a very rare person indeed. And I think what happened is you had the architecture profession fragment. I think initially you had an enterprise architect in the early days. I think the role is fragmented into more business-facing architects, more domain architects that perhaps look after certain platforms or certain parts of the business. So maybe like mortgages in banking and retail current accounts, whatever, checking accounts. I think that what's happened is architecture, as organizations have become more complex and the interactions between organizations, supply chains and things like that have become more complex, there's been a need for more architecture, and that's where you've seen the fragmentation. And I think BA in an ideal world is a subset of EA. So business architecture is a component of enterprise architecture, but the challenge is you can't find many enterprise architects who can do everything. So what you have is, I think, some generalist enterprise architects, and then I think you have specialist business architects when you really want to get to the nitty gritty of what's the business model all about? What capabilities do we really have at a high level? We don't really care about the technical nitty gritty at this point in time. We just care about how this organization operates, functions, and how it could be optimized. And then I think once you've established that, you can then get into, all right, what does the technology architecture look like? And I think these days it requires a good group of architects to really get the full enterprise architecture picture. Wendy, what's your view on that?
I could not agree more with every single thing you just said. Chris,
Just muted.
you're on mute. Yeah.
There we go. As I was saying, you you realize, of course, and like a little bit back to what Phil was talking about, right? These are. This is going to sound bad. I don't really mean it this way. These are sort of esoteric concepts. How the business operates, right? I mean, when you talk to a lot of folks on the ground, it's like, no, we use SAP to do this, this, and this, and Informatica to do manage file transfer, right? And in their mind, that's how the business works. Do you know what I mean? Right? So how do we get people who think like that, and people who think up here with incense and I don't know, magic wands and all that stuff, right, sort of stuff, right? How do we get those people talking? Because it sounds to me like they are living in different worlds. Am I wrong?
But
I remember talking to the Oracle consulting guys, and they're saying, "Hey, listen, our software does this. This is the way you run your business." I mean, including like the costing models and stuff like that, right? This is the way you send an invoice, the way we tell you to send an invoice. I'm like, my God, this is a complicated business, and it's been across, it's multiple countries and all of this stuff. And no, that's not what happens. But I really remember walking in going, this is the way you do it.
I think what you're talking about though is far lower level. And I think you're right. I think it's horses for courses, right? This is
wait. What did you just say?
Horses for courses.
Horses for courses?
Okay. So should I start to unpack that? My understanding of that term. My understanding of the term is you have horses that do show jumping. Blurry.
Yes.
I think, and then you have race horses for the Grand National, which is So I think that's what it means. And maybe you have a Shire horse for pulling your heavy equipment.
That's why they use draft horses to pull beer. I mean, it's built into their name.
So what does a cat on the ground do? If you're a consultant, let's say, and you're in one of these companies doing whatever, and you identify this need, that's one category. And I think the other is sort of what you were referring to, Phil. You're in a cubicle in one of these companies, right? Or what, I don't even know what we call it now. You're in a Zoom box at one of these companies. How do you, in those scenarios, are there things that you can do? Are there opportunities that you should be looking at taking advantage of?
We know how to handle this poorly, right? The house is on fire. It's all going to burn down. I mean, screaming fire, that's the problem. That is a problem, right? That is a way to not do it.
Catastrophize.
Yeah, it's exactly a CBT model or a CBT term, catastrophizing, right? Catastrophizing this doesn't work because everyone looks at you and goes, that's alarmist. And even if he's right, I don't want to listen to a knucklehead that talks like that. Yes. So how do you do it? I mean, I think you have to be in the spot where you're talking to the right people. And I always love talking to the people who are closest to the customer because they are the ones that will care the most about this kind of stuff typically, and say, I'm looking for ways. I mean, approach this like a sane human being. I'm looking for ways to take friction out of this. I'm looking for ways to do this better and on target, perhaps. Who should be part of that conversation? I'm wondering, do you think, I always like the idea of asking good questions. That's my idea. Ask good questions and let them come to the conclusion that it's time to do something else. I'm sorry, that was me. Socratic Phil, go ahead.
I don't know.
It's an Elenchus.
You're the expert here. What about those cats?
Yeah, well,
or dogs. Cats or dogs.
Or dogs. We had a dog on the show just earlier today. Yeah, exactly. Sure. Exactly. There's always in the back of my mind, lead with value, deliver value, build as you go, right? And if you see this as a valuable discipline for an organization to have for all the variety of reasons that we've laid out here, whether you're a consultant or whether you're someone internally, it's about getting traction, finding that usage, build, just enough, just in time, and start using it. I will say also for consultants or even folks in a tool space, you can embed, and I have certainly seen people do, you can embed business architecture in the products or services that you offer and how you present things as well, right? So that's another way to do it. But I also think there's opportunity for consultants to help people in organizations start and grow their practices and do a really good job at it.
The third most watched episode surprised us all, episode 22, the one about Consulting 4.0.
I'm kind of is this the new and improved tide? Listen, I want to start out and I want to claim that I'm an undecided voter, but really I'm on team Codswallop on this one, right? I just don't get this thing of why it was all 4.0. I think it's just hype, but I'm willing to have that conversation. Convince me that we're solving a new problem. Convince me that we've not been delivering to the clients what they need, or that they need something brand new from us, and I'll be with you. But right now, it just sounds like it just sounds like a badge we've stuck on a product. Hey, this is merchandising of our consulting practice. And by the way, I'm gone. I don't know about consulting 4.0. I'm doing 5G consulting now. That's I skipped over 4.0.
Let's just go to 6.0. Consulting 6.0. That's what we need. We've always sort of done these like consulting engagements where we're doing a transformation. We're going to transform, and it always struck me as something that the firm I was working for, that we were doing to the client, right? Like, we know better, so we're going to come in and transform you. And here's your new org structure, and here are your value streams, and this is how you should think about. And so what I'm doing right now is a little bit different, right? This is much more co-creation of a new way of working in this one particular part of this FS firm that I've been working at for a while. And to me, that's different. Honestly, I almost feel like an employee, which could be good, could be bad. It depends on how you look at it. But I feel like I'm in the middle of helping this client. We're co-creating something together to help them work better.
But there's two different things here. Consulting 1, 2, and 3. Really, I think of that as trickle-down technology. And that's reference back to trickle-down economics, right? Like, Chris, what you're saying, we come in and we know better than you, we're going to flow this down to you. So what's interesting about 4.0 is you have clients reaching out, and I'm straddled between 3.0 and 4.0 right now. Because I got some clients I'm doing 3.0 stuff with, but I got some clients coming forward, we're talking about business ventures and going in together, where they're asking me to bring in the skill of building, not just building the technology, because frankly, building tech is easy. I can go outsource any tech anywhere as long as I have requirements and do it for $15 an hour in some, non-US place. But knowing what to build and how to, and those mindsets and those approaches to evolving the product to meet a customer value, I think that's where consulting 4.0 is going. And that's why I think that I'll say it's in its infancy. Because 1, 2, and 3 have been democratized due to just open information. The information that consulting companies had that made them valuable is not what makes them valuable anymore. In our age of digital products, that's the true value right there. So I think that's where you're seeing consultancy 4.0 coming in and actually saying, okay, here's how I call it become a tech company. This is always what I've said is, this is how you become a tech company.
But I want to read you something off of, I won't say which consulting company. It's a large consulting company. I'm going to read to you something here, and I kind of want to get your reaction. Okay. We combine top consulting talents with IP assets and technology to deliver what we call augmented consulting, or consulting 4.0. What does that mean? What does that mean?
I don't think you're supposed to know. It's like part of a sacred text.
Yes, and then we'll tell you.
Yeah. Listen, you'll pay to know what you really think. I get it. I mean, there's this, as a consultant, right? I mean, certainly we're bringing expertise and experience to a problem, right? I mean, and if I understand where Bill is headed, it's like, we're going to go create new things. But I've got to believe that over the annals of consultancy, there's lots of times where consulting engagements have yielded new products or new product lines, right? I mean, it's a development cycle. We make stuff. That's what we do, right?
Yeah, give me 3 seconds. I want to answer that. Yes and no. Yes, you create new things, but in my experience, once you leave with a new product created, it's the maintenance and it's the evolution into a longer term set of products and features that fall short on the client company. I've seen multiple times where I've gone in with a project, and I'm going to use the word project because I built a product as part of a project. There's a finite beginning and finite end. And you try to transition, but then you look back 6-8 months to see how they're doing, and they have gone either no further than when you left, and or they've regressed because they don't have the skill sets to continue the product development on it. So I'm going to stop there. That's why I think this is different. And Chris, I don't know what big company you're reading. That was my BS meter peg. That was somebody marketing using big buzzwords, trying to sell $600 an hour services for, who knows what they are. But
yeah, I mean, I want to, there's another sentence after that, which may push your bullshit meter off the charts, right? So after they talk about augmented consulting, the future, Conan? Yes, the future. The future is data and people driven. And we want our teams to pioneer these new approaches. Keep in mind, none of those new approaches are actually defined anywhere on the page.
The main difference in 4.0 is these consulting companies have been blamed for just providing high-level vision and telling the companies what to do and walk out of the door. So one change which we are seeing in 4.0, I believe, is helping them through the execution, because the companies, that's where they fail. So they need more support on hand-holding them during the execution phase and not just helping them just devise the strategy. I know you're itching to say something. Go ahead.
I want to say it a different way. This may be a good quote. Someone be quiet. So what you're saying, Shashi, is somebody like me walks in against a big four, and because they need 5 people to create vision and create a product, I can just kick their ass, charge $500 an hour, still be way cheaper, and get out with a working product because they're still stuck in an old model. Whereas I don't want to use the term agile, but I can go from cradle to grave. And I, being a 4.0 consultant who's driving and disrupting the industry, because now whatever company it is, you don't need a full team of junior people for 3 months to come up with requirements. You have a person like Bill Benson who comes in and within 3 weeks has a two market product that's already generating ROI.
No, that is the challenge. So more and more we see, even within our firm, we are looking at when we go and do some sort of an assessment. See, here is how the traditional consulting works. You go to the client. Okay, we are going to assess your environment. We will define your future state. We will develop a roadmap for you, and we will develop a business case. These are the 4 key things, no matter where you started 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and what you do now. Consulting firms do these 4 things. So the situation is changing now is help them define the future first. When we say define, we don't mean putting a few PowerPoint slides. And this is exactly what you mentioned. You need to build prototype for them. You need to build something which they can touch, feel, and see a minimum viable product, and then early in the phase before you build the roadmap or anything of that sort. So people can see. And it is, at some level, it is market validated or tested.
We've been making stuff all along, right? 4.0, I mean, as this article started, the thing that we use as the core for this conversation, it says that we are makers. And I would attest that consultants have always been makers at some level, right? I mean, that's part of what you do. There is a gap, and we fill the gap. Whether that's a thin layer of caulk between 2 existing systems or brand new bridge, we're building something.
But McKinsey's and BCGs of the world never used to build anything. They were not makers. I think where it comes from is key. If this article was written by, traditional management consulting firm, yes, they were never makers. They would just come, they would tell the companies what to do. They would never do that for them.
No. At some level, have we not always been kind of doing this? Maybe it's not an actual product that we're producing, but haven't we always been providing this level of advice and expertise?
And then maybe not. I mean, maybe that was, maybe there was a difference there, right? And that was kind of the consulting versus the software development, or however you might want to say it, right? So teams came in and did things. So if I brought in, and that's a distinction I guess I've not really thought about a lot, which is, kind of back to Shashi's point, the difference between bringing in, for example, McKinsey versus an Oracle consulting or something like that.
4th most watched, episode 18, the one about the PMO.
A lot of the reasons why PMOs fail is because the people who are in charge of them don't really know how to get it up the first time right. And so I saw that as an opportunity, and I thought, maybe I can go ahead and help fellow PMO leaders to make it work for them. so that they don't have to, Google stuff up. They don't have to go and piecemeal things together. They don't have to figure it out while, building relationships, figuring out a roadmap, trying to convince the value of something that really should be there, and so on, so that they have something that's set and tested that they can apply immediately to their situations.
So, Chris, if you're done interviewing, should we start ripping project management apart?
Nice.
Bill's not here. Bill's not here to interject that.
Yeah. So I'm gonna do that, right? So there is, I'm like, many people under the, I would love to hear from you, Hussein. Many people under the cover of calling themselves as project managers are essentially nothing more than project administrators.
Yeah.
Right. So how would you differentiate between somebody playing the role of a project administrator versus a true project manager?
Yeah, and let me throw in another word, another phrase that's going around out there, Shashi. It's project leader, right? Because management is not enough, and so leadership is being thrown under the bus as well here. But that's a great question, and honestly, that's one of the reasons why PMOs have such a bad rep. According to the Association for Project Management, 50% of PMOs fail 3 years after they're been set up. So if you ask me to set up a PMO today and ask me, hey, Hussein, will this be successful? I could literally flip up a coin and say heads is going to succeed and tails is going to fail in 3 years. And, I know we're going to be talking about the value of PMOs, but PMOs can be far more valuable to organizations than the probability of a coin toss. And if somebody's there who's just taking orders, who's just doing things in a very templated way, who's not putting their thinking cap on, who's not showing a bit of a spine in their backbone, they're your administrators, right? They're there who are just going to be taking orders. They're not really managing. They're definitely not leading. They're just doing what they've been told. And so, I would say in certain situations, project coordinators could do more than just being administrative in nature. But a lot of and I see a lot of people with a lot of credentials and a lot of experience falling under that project administrative category. Sadly, so a lot of people just want to get those credentials, if you will. A lot of alphabets after their names, but it's they're not applying that in real life. They're not applying that in how their leadership, how their stakeholders really want them to lead their project successfully. The ultimate thing that we need to do as project managers or program managers or portfolio managers or PMO leaders is to make sure that things get done.
Right.
And things get done in not just on time, on budget, on quality, under scope, whatever, but rather what the reasons for the projects or the programs or the portfolio were there, those get realized, right? So the funny thing that I see in projects everywhere, in programs everywhere, is that we're going to spend, tons and tons of effort and resources and thinking cap on to build that business case, right? We're figuring out like all these different ways to analyze what benefits the project can bring to the table so that it can pass through the intake process. And then once that's done, once the project's approved, once the program's approved, then nobody really looks at the business case. Nobody really looks at what's going to happen, how the project is actually going to help the company, why it's actually being set up, why it's actually being executed. And that is the unfortunate part. So you can call it any sort of fancy term, program value realization, benefits realization, ROI, whatever you want to call it. If nobody's keeping an eye on those things that you promise at the start of the project, then it doesn't really matter how much on time, how much on budget your project was.
I think certifications are required if you want to learn something new, right? So same thing again with PMO. If you have done you have credential or portfolio or project to show as a program manager or a PMO lead, you probably don't need certification per se.
I agree. I'm not a big fan of these certifications, to be honest. If you have 10 years of project management experience, who cares if you have a PMP? If you're managing, programs above $30 million, who cares if you don't have the PGMP? And there's another one sitting out there for portfolio management. It doesn't really matter.
All right. So Hussein, what does good project management look like?
Just get things done. There are a few things that I look at, and I break out the skills of a PMO leader into 4 distinct categories. There's the people skills, there's the organizational skills, there's the functional skills, and then there's obviously the project skills. To me, the project skills are the last to consider. The people skills are the most important to consider. Interestingly, when I've glanced through many project management office leadership opportunities, the job descriptions out there, they're saying, PMP preferred MBA, a couple of other things as well in there. So it's a good thing that there people are looking for things around having an organizational awareness or purview. But to me, the best person who could lead the charge with, for a PMO like that is someone who's been in the organization for a bit and has the credibility and good solid relationships with key people that the PMO is expected to work with, and most importantly has a reputation of getting things done. It doesn't matter if it's someone within the operations team, it doesn't matter if someone is within the strategy team who has little to no experience in project management. If they have that reputation, then people will work with them, people will listen to them, and that more than anything else is needed for a PMO leader to succeed.
Rounding out the top 5, the 5th most watched episode 44, the one about ethics.
I mean, well, to me, right, I think for all of us, there's this idea of what does it mean to act with virtue? And that's the piece of that I am bringing, right? So in modern parlance, without bringing some other philosophical framework into play, we just have to say, what does it mean to be ethical and do what we do? And I think particularly when we're doing something that's so highly leveraged, right? Consulting inside of technology, there's lots of opportunity to be a bad actor. And I think we have to figure out what does that mean to be a good actor, and how can we become the philosopher consultant, right? How can we become the person who acts with virtue inside this space? Where are the guardrails? And the thing is, you might work for a big sophisticated firm that has given you lots of training, and you might be with somebody who has never told you anything about it. And you got to figure that out on your own. So I think we ought to talk about that.
There's a lot of things we can do as consultants. And of course, there's always the getting more business, more profit as motivator. But at the end of the day, it comes down to integrity of our firm and integrity of us as individuals. Things that may be written or not written, such as maybe not taking on work we're not qualified for, providing advice we're not qualified for, things like that. But I also think, I'd like to throw out too, that I think in our world of technology, our very connected world, the choices we make, the things we are involved in for clients, the solutions we build, I think they have a big impact on the world. And I also think it's up to us to think about the stakeholders, think about the impacts of those solutions, and raise our voice, right, when we see concerns and help guide in the very important role we are.
So is this a thing where it's like, I have my own internal moral code, and that gets reflected in sort of the ethical values that I practice and I advise my clients on, or is this there should be like what Paul Price talks about, right? About like a standard, right? That says here are the 10 rules of consulting ethics. Right. And if you violate one of them, you're kicked out of the bar or whatever, right? That sort of like a law person would be, right? You violate your ethics, you're out. Consulting, it seems a lot more wishy-washy. I don't know, Phil, is it an internal code, or is there something that we can codify here that says it's these 10 rules?
I think that's exactly the issue that's here, right? And the thing is, when we start, right, we do a thing and we have tradition, we have culture, we have the mos maiorum, right? We have these whole ideas that but they're not written down in the beginning. And then we get to the point we write them. And at some point, we might even codify them into law at some point, right? And that's the way that we say, look, we want to make sure we're all playing by the same rule book. And this is what the rule book looks like. But in this case, I mean, technology has just moved so fast that we've not codified those rules. I mean, like in America, right? We don't have good laws around fair trade and all of those kinds of things in the tech space because that just didn't catch up, right? I mean, the laws haven't caught up. So at the same time, we're trying to figure this out, but we all think we all know what the right thing is. And I'm not even sure we all always agree on it. And that's a conversation that I hope that we are having here today, is to say, look, I mean, there are some rules. We think there are some good go-by rules. And if you're in a regulated industry and you've got, HIPAA or cybersecurity or ISOC or something like that, you've got certain rules around which you must have to follow. But in some places you don't, and you have to make a decision. And we got to figure out how do we come up with that? How do we come up with the rules? And how do we do this for ourselves?
Governments are definitely playing catch up, aren't they? And I think it's interesting if you look at, like you say, Phil, the financial services space with its sort of strict regulatory frameworks that came off the back of, the financial crises that we've had, right? And I think what we're going through, though, is a crisis of, in some cases, democracy, which doesn't feel like it's been. I think the reason this is still dragging on is if you look at the sort of digital platform sort of space and the social network space, I think most people don't feel like the right regulatory regime or rules or even framework guidelines were put in for these companies to follow. And the governments are still catching up with that. I mean, I know in the UK, we've got stuff going in for telcos, for our telecoms providers and for our critical national infrastructure, but I still don't see yet. And maybe it's because of massive lobbying or funding of political parties. I don't see the regulatory laws coming to govern the use of data in the way that we've kind of been talking about, right? And I know this is one specific area because you could apply ethics to a number of different business areas, but for me, the whole data and AI, algorithms that can potentially create adverse outcomes for the customers that are ultimately using these things is an area that I feel the governments are just way behind, and I still don't see enough signs that it's going to get better quickly.
I agree entirely. And I want to jump ahead of Wendy, but I mean, I think I agree entirely on this, and we don't know. And the thing is, we start with the idea, and a naive idea that, if we have this data, we can do some good. But we don't ask ourselves the question, who will do bad with this data? And that is where I think that we get in trouble. And I think Wendy's ready to jump in on that. But
no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think taking an idea of a code or code of ethics seriously it's the time to consider this. And if I think about the doctor's oath, which I won't pretend to be an expert in, but it transcends everything, right? Putting the patient first, because in the role of a consultant, well, where's my loyalty, or where's my honor, where's my responsibility to my own ethics, to what my consulting firm thinks are ethics, to what the client wants to do, or just to really stretch this in the spirit of some of the examples you've given. If the patient, in this case, is the society and the organizations that contribute to that society, it does put a lot more seriousness on a code and what we all need to do. And frankly, that applies to consultants and others, right, that are creating solutions.
Yeah, I want to back up on the governments are way behind, and arguably yes, and of course they're not experts in any of this. I mean, you think about like a Facebook, right? And they've got how many tens of thousands of people sitting around trying to figure out how they can use your picture, right, or your data, right? And the poor saps in the bureaucracy in Washington, they can barely tie their shoes, let alone like figure this stuff out, right? So but there's precedent for not needing some of that in order to get started at the very least, right? I think about like payment card industry, right? Like PCI compliance, right? Yeah, they were, but you know what? We're probably going to get regulated on this stuff. We should probably come up with like some standards for our industry. It was market led. It was market driven. Yeah, there was some other stuff around it, or like ISO 27001, right? So the international standards around this is right and this is wrong. The consulting industry doesn't have any of that, right? Like we were looking at some pre-read stuff, right? And I have it up over here, and it's like, you know, here's the code of conduct for consultants, and one of them is like treat others the way you want them to treat you. It's like, really? See, if I don't do that, am I in violation of the ethical code of consulting? Right? Like some of this stuff, it's in my mind really subjective, really like all over the place. And there's no body that seems to be like, you know, here are the 5 things you really can't do. You can't get a payout from the client while you're working for them, right? Like, or you can't go to work for the client after you've advised them on creating a role that happens to be you, right? Like all those sorts of things seem to be things that we could really define. Some of these other things are like, be nice, right? Like, it's not me.
We could say that way is the golden rule, by the way, that you're quoting, saying, is that really legitimate or not? I don't know. Sounds like a load of codswallop to me.
Codswallop.
I don't even use that term.
And it's also contextual too, right? I just think about travels to different parts of the world, and what would be appalling in certain countries. In other countries, is just sort of the way things work, right? So there's also that context as well.
Bribery, right? Bribery.
Exactly.
I immediately went to the phrase facilitation payment.
Yeah.
Nice.
In some places, it's customary, and that's the way that business is done.
Yeah.
If you don't do it, you don't get your business done. So does it become unethical, right? Does it become unethical then to pay off the guy because he's expecting a bribe? Is that unethical? Let's take that example. I think that's a great one. Is it unethical in that case? Because it would go against my internal moral code, right? I can't bribe someone, right?
The thing is, even in countries in which it is de rigueur, if you are us and you are doing business out of one of our countries, it is illegal. So it's super clear. It is a bright line, right?
But look at the Western world, and I'm going to take someone out for $1,000 dinner. Okay.
Yep.
How is that really any different to a facilitation payment?
Yep. Looks different.
Well, no, I understand your point exactly. And the thing is, and we at least in the US, have made some of those illegal, right? Yeah. And some you can no longer, I mean, for example, in the consultancy side, headed towards medical doctors and stuff, there are now limits around what you can do and it be legal still. So I think, and that's a case where the law finally catches up and says, well, we left a little hole here and this kind of got out of the way, you know, speakers fees and stuff like that, or what are they, you know, those kinds of things, right?
We're still waiting for those speakers fees from Chris, right?
Yeah. Well, I need, you know, by the way, I don't know if you guys know about the Swamp Rabbit Cafe and grocery. They have lots of very sustainable, locally sourced products in beautiful Greenville, South Carolina. Right on the Reedy River, and there's a beautiful bike trail. Oliver, you would love it. I don't know how many miles, Phil? Dozens and dozens of miles of bike trails along the river. It's fantastic. And you can stop at the Swamp Rabbit Cafe and grab a coffee.
Sandwich.
So back to bribery and extortion. No, but I think, you know, so yeah, like and the point I was making earlier about like PCI compliance, right? You're right. There are rules around what's legal and what's not in terms of gifts, but corporations have also, we've worked for corporations where they say, listen, if you get anything that's worth more than $25, you have to report it. And, you know, who wants to be reporting gifts that are more than $25? You're just like, I'll pay for my own dinner. Thank you, Mr. Consultant. I'm paying for my own dinner. I've experienced that going back quite a while, right? So I don't know that it's universal that nobody cares about these things, right? Some companies do. So yeah, I don't know.
So I think that, you know, the question we were trying to get at, I think, is as a consultant, how do you make these? And the thing is, there are, again, we've got some places where it's codified. It's a law. It's a company policy, or it's Chris's heart of hearts, right? I mean, what do I think is right? And I think some piece of that might be, you know, to help you as a consultant sort of make a decision where the other rules are not so clear, is is it a thing you could be transparent about without consequence?
That's a really good way of putting it. Could you tell your mother about it and not feel bad?
My mother wouldn't understand. My mother just told me, I just got off the phone with her, and she said, I was telling people how good you are at what you do, but I told them I don't know what it is. And I was like, thanks, Mom. I feel good about that. And it seems like an honest take.
Well, we've opened up a lot of interesting topics here, actually. I think absent of standards in ethics that are really solid and clear, I think at a minimum, just the reflection for individuals on what they believe and where their lines are. But I also think we're in a very interesting shifting world where what's okay today is not necessarily okay tomorrow. So even more important that I think, when we think about our own individual integrity, brand behavior is to be looking ahead a little bit and thinking about, what's the impact on all stakeholders really. And knowing that how we show up as individuals, we can hopefully influence others to make changes and act with integrity as well.
I like this idea of, if you're doing something and you would be totally okay with everyone knowing all the details of whatever it is that you're doing, maybe it's, I don't know if it's okay, but at the very least, it's at least in alignment with what you think is okay, right? If it's, God, I really hope someone doesn't find out that I don't know, bribing the guy or whatever, right? Then that's probably not something you should be doing. And, I think there's even, Oliver, you sort of alluded to it, right? It's a little bit like, there may be rules for professional conduct in this company. I am not comfortable bribing somebody. And even though that's what is expected as, so I got to go find another job if I'm going to adhere to that ethical moral code. I don't know. Phil, last thoughts. You going to bring up stoicism? Because I want to hear what Marcus Aurelius would have to say about that.
I already brought it up. I mean, we passed right by it. Do what wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice tell you to do, right? I think the thing, I think from a practical wisdom standpoint, right? I want to take what Oliver said just like one more step. And that is, if you're feeling uncomfortable with something, ask. Just lay it out and say, hey, you know what? I'm not comfortable here. Should I be? Am I misunderstanding something? But I think too much of the time we want to demonstrate competence. We want to appear integrated when we are not integrated. We are questioning the moment. It's okay to ask questions. That's your job, for God's sake. You're a consultant. Your job is to ferret out to the truth of the matter. And you do that by asking questions. So ask.
Thanks for watching these 5 episodes. This is the top 5 of our 50 episodes to date. So listen, if you want to know more, if you want to watch these episodes, which you probably should, right? At least listen to them. You should definitely go to www.consultantsayingthings.com or check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/consultantsayingthings. Easy to find. Find us on LinkedIn. Hit us up. Always interested in new topics. Always interested in nice guests that have something interesting to say. This is one of the best things I've ever done. And I get to talk to amazing people over the past 4 years. And I want to keep doing it. So hit us up, like and subscribe. Thank you very much.